you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Welcome to Truth and Justice with Vivian King. We have a great show planned for you tonight. Recently, a man by the name of Rony Perez was falsely accused of sexually assaulting his daughter's friend. And we're going to journey you through the trial. It was very interesting. By the grace of God, he won. He was acquitted. He was found not guilty. He had to stay in the Harris County Jail for 15 months. Waiting for his trial because he is a resident. He's a resident here, but he's not a citizen. He's here legally, but there were some questions that he might be a flight risk, and so he wasn't given a bond. Just think of how dreadful that would be to be in jail, get taken from your family for a false accusation of rape. Everybody believes children. No one believes you, and you've gone from an everyday working man with a family, with a wife and children, to having to sit in the Harris County Jail like a criminal. Well, that happened. That awful thing happened to Rony Perez. He was blessed to have a supportive wife who's here in the studio. They might get a little nervous because we haven't practiced, and they do speak Spanish probably as a first language, but we're going to still interview him, and we're going to talk about it. And his wife might help him with a little interpretation if I talk a little bit too fast. And his lawyer is here, George Tennant, who was the man who took on the state of Texas. And it's a daunting task to take on the state of Texas.
Yes,
the state of Texas has 250 assistant district attorneys, but specifically 3 prosecutors assigned to each court with an investigator that's usually a retired homicide detective or a retired police officer that's now starting another career as a DA investigator. They have a paralegal, a secretary, and a law student intern. Lawyers have just them. And so it's, and the judges are usually ex-prosecutors who sympathize with the prosecutors. And I'm not saying that to say that the prosecutors are bad. We have great prosecutors in Harris County, and they don't know what happened. I mean, if a child says something happened, they have to investigate it and accept the charges. So I'm not throwing blame at anybody, but I do want you to understand the daunting task that a criminal defense lawyer has when they have to go against the government with all of the money, the resources, and the staff. So I applaud you, George, for taking on that job. A lot of lawyers won't do it. They make their clients plead guilty, take probation, even if their clients say they didn't do it, because they just don't have enough energy to fight. And your clients can't pay you enough to fight the state of Texas or to hire enough people to go against the people that's in the court. So let's get right into it, George. Tell us a little bit tell us what happened. And there were some bad things that happened in the trial that we did not like, and I want to point those out. But I want to start off by just saying what the police report said.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure. Rony Perez was initially accused of molesting his daughter's friend on or about December 23rd, 2011. The outcry happened about 4 weeks later on February 1st, 2nd, somewhere up in there. And Rony was arrested in March. I was hired in June, but let's go back to the beginning. The allegation is that Ashley spent the night with his daughter Allison, and at about 4 in the morning, she initially said in the outcry interview that she was on her way to the kitchen, and Rony grabbed her out of the kitchen, pulled her into his room, forcibly assaulted her. It hurt, she bled, it was very painful. She then went back She went back to the room with his daughter, Allison, and went back to sleep. Well,
that's the first story.
That's the first story, exactly. Now, that's also the story that's on the outcry interview. During the course of our investigation, we had the opportunity to listen to what she told the SANE nurse. As you know, the SANE nurse is the person that did the actual forensic exam of her genital area, which showed no damage, no trauma. And she told the SANE nurse that she was in the bed with his daughter, Allison. He snuck into the bedroom, grabbed her by her hand, pulled her out of the bed, took her into his room, sexually assaulted her, and took her back to his room. That's the second story. During the course of Rony went with counsel before I was hired to the police station. When they called him, they said, "Rony, we want to ask you questions about what happened to Ashley." Rony didn't know anything had happened to Ashley, so he made a mistake that a lot of people make. He went down to the police station to attempt to clear his name. During the course of that interview, he consistently denied every allegation from the moment I met him until the moment the jury said not guilty. He never wavered once in his innocence. So after he was arrested and I was hired, I went to talk to him. And one of the things about Mr. Perez that I thought was really refreshing is the first thing he asked me was, "How's your family? How are you doing?"
Oh, that is refreshing.
Yes, and he was behind glass. And every time I would go to visit him, we would talk about his family. He would ask about his daughter. He would ask how she was doing. He would ask about his wife. He would ask about how things were now that he wasn't there. At the time of the arrest, the daughter was living with Rony Perez. He worked as an air conditioner repairman. As a matter of fact, on the day of the alleged outcry, he had to get up at 6 in the morning to go fix an air conditioner. It was a commercial repair job. So while he's languishing in jail, we worked the case up. There were no offers that he was willing to accept because he was not guilty. As a matter of fact, at one point during the trial, he told me across the glass, "If I have to say the words, 'I'm guilty,' I don't care if it's reduced to a Class C." By this time, he's studied, he's really knowledgeable. "I don't care if it's reduced to a Class C, which is the equivalent of a speeding ticket. I'm not pleading guilty because I didn't do anything to her, and they know that." So we had the trial.
Well, let's talk about, and I know you're going to talk about this, but let's talk about the stories. So we have the initial outcry statement that is to the police officer that says that little girl was walking in the bathroom, on her way to the bathroom, and Rony grabbed her and took her into his bedroom and raped her.
Yeah, but that's a very interesting point you brought up because the initial outcry was not to the police officer. The initial outcry was to Kimberly's boyfriend.
And who's Kimberly?
Kimberly is Ashley's older sister by 3 years.
So she's the one that's 15.
Yeah, and she had a 28-year-old boyfriend.
So she initially tells Kimberly.
Yes, she initially tells her sister Kimberly. Kimberly tells her boyfriend. Her boyfriend tells Ashley's mother, Maritza. Maritza calls the police. The police became the outcry witness.
Okay. But she did tell the police that she was going to the bathroom and he took her and raped her in his room.
That's correct.
Where did she say that Rony's wife was, Nancy was?
She wasn't there.
Okay, so she wasn't there.
No.
And that was confirmed?
Yes.
Okay. So then we talked to the SANE nurse. That's the acronym that we use in the legal community. It's the Sexual Assault Nurse Examination. Okay? So that's done at a hospital or at the Children's Assessment Center by a registered nurse that's also been trained in specifically doing a sexual assault kit where they comb through the pubic hairs a certain way. They put the children in a certain position depending on their age. It could be frog style, which is on their knees. It could be on their back if they're a little older. This girl was a little older, and so it was on her back, I'm sure. And they go through all of their body, specifically collecting evidence that is going to be put in a bag that is going to be given to the police to take to do DNA examinations and things like that. So that's called a SANE nurse, and that's what you'll hear us saying. So then we had the SANE nurse interview, and that's where she tells the SANE nurse that he came and got her out of her bed.
That is correct.
And she was in the bedroom with his daughter.
That's correct.
And
With
took her to
Allison.
his bedroom and had sex with him.
That's correct.
And then there is the third story. What's
Yes.
the third story?
The third story is that she was going to the restroom, and he accosted her on her way out of the restroom. The rest of the story ends the same way. Basically, the first story is she's going to the kitchen to get water.
Oh, the first one is kitchen. Okay.
Right. Second story, she's in the bed sleeping. Third story is she's on her way to the restroom. Now, the third story is beyond, it took all of us aback because the apartment layout is roommate style, meaning that on Ronnie's side of the apartment, there's his master bedroom, which has the bathroom and a sink and everything in it. On the other side of the apartment, across from the living room, the exact same setup. So if two college kids or two young adults were roommates, you could each have basically the same size room with a bathroom, private shower in your room.
So basically it's like two suites.
Exactly, with a common living area between.
So the story that didn't make sense is she's acting like, instead of going to the restroom that's a part of their suite, she's saying she went to the daddy's restroom?
That's the only way it would make sense.
Wow.
But by this time, everything's falling apart.
And what's the fourth story? Is there a fourth story?
No, the fourth story is what the jury heard.
Okay, so that's what she tells in trial.
Yes.
So, but in the police report, where was this fourth story contained? I mean, the third story contained, that she was going to the restroom?
Not in the police report.
So which ones were in the police report?
The only thing in the offense report is that she was on her way to the kitchen to get some water, and Rony Perez attacked her on her way back from the kitchen.
And then when you got the medical records is where you saw the SANE interview where
Right.
she said that he got her out of the bedroom.
Right.
And then the other two stories come in court?
Yes.
What about on the children's assessment video? Children are taken to the Children's Assessment Center, which is on Bolivar over in West University. And we call that the CAC video, just using acronyms again. So what did she say? What version did she tell, if you remember?
Yes, I do.
CAC?
I remember very well. The version she said in the CAC interview was that she was on her way to the kitchen to get some water, and he attacked her on her way back from the kitchen to the bedroom. She never made it back to the bedroom because he was walking, he woke up, attacked her, she left the kitchen, took her to his room, sexually assaulted her. And what I keyed in on there was the fact that she went into great detail as to how he penetrated her, and it hurt, and she bled, which was at the Children's Assessment Center, which is the same day that she did the SANE nurse exam, the sexual exam, which showed no trauma to the vaginal area, to the hymen, to the labia, no bruising, no scarring. And this is something that came up at trial that we got the SANE nurse to admit. In Texas, it's common for the SANE nurse to try and imply that hymens heal. But what we...
Before you go into that interesting lesson, let's take a quick call.
Sure.
Caller, you're on. Please turn your volume down and talk directly into the phone.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to know, are you a federal lawyer?
Sir, I'm a criminal lawyer, and I do everything. I do this show to educate the public, though, not to, talk about what type of law I practice. But it's all criminal case. I do all criminal cases, and you're welcome to read about me on my website at vivianrking.com.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So let's talk about that interesting point.
Yeah, and this was something we found during trial that the SANE nurse reluctantly had to help us with. In a lot of sexual assault cases, they will imply that hymens heal and that you can be sexually assaulted, have your hymen broken, and it can heal to such an extent that there's no damage. But what we found is that there would be scarring. So the key question, and this was nothing but God because it was not written, and it was not written on my cross-examination notes. The key question I posed to the SANE nurse was, is there any difference between an intact hymen that is healed and a hymen that's never been torn and repaired? She said yes. And her cross went downhill from there, or uphill for us from there, because she then had to say that Ashley's hymen there was no scar tissue consistent with healing, which would bring...
And that's the key.
Yes.
Because if she's bled, then there needs to be healing. Anytime there's blood, there's healing.
Right. And I was warned that they were going to mention a lot about the fact that hymens can be intact and women can be pregnant. Hymens can be intact despite documented rape. But like I said, by the grace of God, the question that came down literally during the middle of cross was, is an intact hymen post repair the same as a hymen afterwards? So, but that was during trial, and I'm sure we're going to go to that now. I apologize for jumping forward on that
That's
tangent.
okay. That's okay. That's kind of interesting. Let me ask you this, Rony. Though, when you know that you didn't do anything to your daughter's friend. Tell me how you felt when you were falsely charged with this.
You can speak English. Just go
Speak English if you can.
Okay. Ellos, no, lo voy a decir en español. En español. Cuando me dijeron eso, yo no podía creer. No me molesté porque yo sabía que no era culpable. Okay. Y me presenté porque la policía me llamó para una entrevista. También me llamó CPS para una entrevista. Y yo cooperé con ellos porque no era mentira. Yo sabía que era mentira. Entonces,
okay, I'm going to let Nancy start interpreting that.
Yeah, it's a lot, yeah. He said as soon as he get the police was coming for him, first thing he do is he want to cooperate with the police because he know he was not guilty, but all his life just calmed down in 1 second because of course he was not guilty, and the first thing that comes into mind was what will happen with my family after.
Right, because are you a working woman?
Yes.
Okay, but you know you needed both your incomes to survive, although by the grace of God you survived even though he was in jail for 15 months, yes, and you managed to pay a lawyer.
Yes. Which
nobody has money sitting around to pay a lawyer, so I know that's difficult, and I applaud you for doing that. Viewers, he does speak English. He's just a little nervous. They're holding hands when you're not looking at them, and so but he wants the public to know, and he appreciates the fact that jurors came out and citizens came out and saw that his story was sincere. So let's talk about something else interesting about your trial, George. These are difficult trials. I've tried a lot of them. I've had great success with them, luckily, because one of the things a lawyer has to do in a sexual assault case that's different from a lot of cases is you have to really get to know your client.
Yes.
You have to really get to know your client because you just never know. When a child says someone has raped them, we all want to comfort the child. And a lawyer's job is to investigate and try to tell your client what's the best thing to do in this situation. So you got to really get to know them. You got to visit them. It's harder when they're in jail because behind bars, it's kind of hard to get to know people. You try, you spend time with them, but it's not the same. It's talking to them at their house or at your office. So, George, I know you had to spend a lot of time with him to try to get to know him and with his wife.
I did, and
I'm sure they couldn't pay you enough for all the time you did, but I'm glad you did it because you do have to really get to know them.
Yes, but with a man like Mr. Perez, it made each visit was uplifting and terrifying at the same time, because the more I talked to him, the more consistently he told the same story over the course of months throughout all the stress. And as you know very well, a lot of times when a person's in custody, they'll get pretty interesting legal theories from what we call jailhouse lawyers and start requesting different motions, different pleadings. There was a moment in October of last year when he had been waiting for trial. At this point, he had been in custody about 7 months. The state, this was after the medical exam came back, and there were some inconsistencies found in the case. And this was also after, with the help of a gentleman by the name of John Manning, he's an investigator, I had brought up the fact that the mother had accused 2 other men of sexual assault in the past that had both been charged, and later the charges were not brought forward, either no billed or acquitted or dismissed. And the state made him an offer in October of last year that would have been the equivalency of a time served. Some sort, we didn't really look at it because he rejected it immediately. But it was on trial day, October 31st last year. The offer was registered for 10 years or something, indecency by contact or non-contact, I don't remember the details. And he started crying in custody, and I didn't know what I'm going to miss Christmas. That was his response, because I'm not taking it.
And see, so many people take a plea of time served, registering as a sex offender just to get out for Thanksgiving and for the holidays. And then you have to live with that for the rest of your life, and you don't realize what you're living with. And so it was very courageous of you, Rony, to stand your ground and to insist that I'm not guilty and I'll just have to be away from my family. And you really, as a lawyer, it brings out the best in you, because you really realize, I'll do this I'm going to do this no matter what for them. If he's willing to stay in here and miss his family, knowing that the only thing that's separating me from those walls, that separated you, George, from the walls with Rony, is that no kid had falsely accused you.
That's all.
And that's the only thing, by the grace of God, none of your children's friends had accused you of raping them.
And with college-age kids, like I reminded the court, including it could be your son, your daughter,
exactly,
on an Alpha, Kappa,
right,
an AKA A5 A party, and something goes wrong, and now you're accused. That's how easy this is. This is one of the more slippery slopes in criminal defense. It's
slippery because we want to protect the victim,
right?
But who's a victim? And that's the problem. And in society, we have it is a slippery slope, because you arrest people too quickly, but yet, if you think they're really a predator, maybe you do have to arrest them. But you don't know yet, because the investigation hadn't been done. You heard George say that Mr. Rony had been in jail 7 months before the medical records had come in.
That's
I mean, so the DAs have arrested him based on a child's allegation, and basically a mother in a child's allegation. And they don't even have the medical records back yet. And then they offer him what's equivalent to time served if he registers as a sex offender. Now, if he didn't do it, is he going to look at his child in the eye and say, I'm registering, I'm a sex offender, when I know I didn't do this? But most people will get out. So I really admire you for staying in and standing your ground and getting your good name back.
And again, I have to thank the family. They were a remarkably supportive family to me. They really gave me the assistance I needed by giving me the space to do my job. The one place where Mr. Perez put pressure on me, and we talked on the phone about this a lot, George, I want my trial date. And I explained that.
And that's so hard to explain, because every court has 1,000 cases pending. And so when you get arrested, you're 1,001. And so, and every court has 20 or 30 trials set. And people are in jail that have been in jail 3 and 4 years that are still waiting for trial dates. Luckily, your judge, the court you were in, goes to trial faster. But she works hard. But it's hard to get to trial. And that's the problem. We have 10,000 people in that jail waiting for trials, waiting for court. And so it's hard to understand that until you get locked up.
And 10,000 families outside,
waiting.
10,000 single mothers working hard to bring 2 kids up.
Yep.
And when you know your husband is not guilty.
Yep. Oh, it's a crazy system. And it's a system, Nancy, and this is one of the reasons why I paid to produce this show, is because people don't understand in Houston what people are going through. You just see one side on the news. You look at the news every night. What do you say? If your husband's case was on the news and they said, oh, tonight Rony Perez was arrested because he raped his daughter's friend, you would go away with the news saying, that son of a bee, he should be in jail, locked under the jail. So every day, people are listening to the news of what just happened with the police. They're listening to the police scanners. They're hearing what's happening every day, and they're reporting stories as if they are true. And so we have a system, a community that comes to convict people because they think everything they hear is true. And that's why it's so hard for a lawyer, and that's why I'm doing this show, to show the other side. I'm putting these shows on YouTube. It's a cable station on Comcast. We've got to tell our stories so that people don't rush to judgment. I think the way the original Constitution was written, you're innocent until proven guilty. We need to get back to that a little bit.
That would be wonderful.
And jurors don't come in to court thinking you're guilty until proven innocent. The reason why I'm a good trial lawyer, as people say I'm a good trial lawyer, is because I have figured that out. People come and think you're guilty until proven innocent. So I try real hard to prove my client's innocence, where it really shouldn't be that way. They should be innocent And the government should be the one working real hard with the resources to prove it, but people don't think that.
That's a very good point. There's something that you, Eric Davis, Tyrone Moncrief, you guys do really well, and I'm trying to do it. The jury has to finish the story.
They have to finish the story.
If they cannot finish the story...
If they cannot finish, your clients are going to jail.
Right. And the way,
even though they might be innocent, you've got to be skilled enough as a lawyer to put the jurors in the position to want to finish that story.
Yes.
And you've got to finish that story.
and then you make a promise and you deliver it during closing.
you have to.
And
You
you
have
can
to.
literally see the clicks happening.
The clicks
as
in
you
people's
connect the
minds.
dots.
Right. That you
That's
have
right.
to you have to answer all those questions. If a child talks about sex and she's, how old was this child, 13?
11
How did
years
she
was
know?
11.
11 years old.
How does she know about sex? Because when she goes to the Children's Assessment Center, she has to describe by herself without her mother, and although mothers usually put kids up to doing it if they're lying, or kids are doing it to get out of trouble that they've gotten in. There's some consistent theories as things that I see when children do this. But they go in that room by themselves and they have to describe sex either with dolls or verbally. Talk about how this child described sex by herself on video, and it's videotaped when she's talking to the counselor.
I don't want to exaggerate, but that was one of the very early in the case. I've been hired maybe two days. I'm sitting down watching this video, and it reminded me. I have a daughter. Well, I have a son that's 10, a daughter that's 12. It reminded me of a school play. There was so much hesitation, and without I'm not going to be critical of the caseworker handling the case, but she had to pull everything because it appeared to me that, and I've seen a few of these, it appeared to me that she either had the flattest affect in the world.
Tell my people what affect is.
Okay. I'm a pretty animated person most of the time. If you saw me speaking in a really low, dull monotone without much inflection or emotion, you would wonder, well, is he taking? Well, for this child, she mumbled, she never made eye contact, she never answered a question directly, and after every question there was maybe a half second, just a little longer than normal. I can't really explain it other than, what's your name? George Tennant. Like that. And
what they do is, if the children are expressionless, which you would think they wouldn't be since they're in a safe, secure, supportive environment, then the state has PhDs or psychologists come and explain why a child would appear nonchalant or like it's no big deal, and they call that flat affect. They just that monotone personality as some type of escapism, or if they're real hyper, they have a psychologist come and explain why they're real hyper. No matter how the child explains it, the government's going to have a PhD and a psychologist to come explain the child's behavior on the witness stand, even though that psychologist has never met the child.
Yeah, and that's where...
and never met the child, but they have them there because they're the government with the resources. That's so unfair, because you think this family can afford a psychologist to be on hand?
That's very interesting that you say that, because...
Let me take a call right quick.
Sure.
Hold that thought, George.
No problem.
Thank you for calling Truth and Justice with Vivian King.
Hey, how you doing, Miss King?
Hey.
George?
Hey, how you doing?
And is Veronica?
It's Rony and Nancy.
Oh, Nancy and okay, Rony. Okay, I got work. I want to know what was the little girl motivation? I mean, why
Oh, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that, Tracy.
Okay, well, I got another question too. In regard to speedy trial, say if I'm locked up in the county, and like you say, some people they sit there for like 6 months, 2 years, or whatever. If I ask for a speedy trial, what is the time span? How long would it take?
If you ask for a speedy trial in the state of Texas, they'd say that doesn't exist.
Oh, really?
That's in federal court. It doesn't exist in Texas. How they got rid of that, how our legislators got rid of that, I have no idea, because it's in the Constitution. It's even in the Texas Constitution, but it doesn't apply.
Okay, tell Rony and Nancy, say, brother, sweaty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So did you hold that thought?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the problems with that is that, well, fortunately, this is one of those cases where the right person just met the right person, because prior to criminal practice, I was in a PhD program, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. Well,
wow.
the license is not active now because I stopped when I went to law school, but the...
well, y'all were blessed
yeah.
to have somebody that had been trained as a counselor.
Yeah, so the cross of the, and under the APA rules, a therapist cannot give forensic opinions and clinical opinions at the same time. It's a conflict.
All right, so explain that to my viewers,
Sure.
because I have everyday people.
Sure. You're either there to help...
Tell them what APA is.
Okay, the American Psychological Association. And forensic would be police-based data, or I think her affect or her personality is this way because of this. Whereas a clinical route would be more along the lines of, I've helped this person, I've interviewed this person, and this is why I think they're the way they are. You cannot do both in the same hat cannot be worn. The same person cannot wear both hats. So that placed the psychologist immediately on the defensive. As soon as she took the stand, that was the first question I asked her. Are we talking about this forensically, or are we talking about this clinically? And without having to go into any detail with the jury and blinding them with science,
she understood.
she knew exactly where I was coming from.
Right.
So after that, it came out that she had sat in the courtroom and observed her, and I basically mentioned that you observed the same thing that the jury observed, right? So, but your opinion is, are you sure your opinion is the same opinion that we have? And, you know, use the pronoun we for the jury, it really helps. But to make a long story short, I don't know why they do that, but those psychologists normally haven't talked to that child at all, just like you said earlier.
And I don't know why, because they're right there at the Children's Assessment Center.
I don't get it.
And so it's like they keep them from talking to the children so they can't find out the truth.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me. Why don't they talk to them? They're right there where the counselors do the interview. They have policemen there. They have the same nurses there. Why wouldn't they have the psychologists? And these cases are pending, like you said, for 15 months. So they had 15 months to interview this child.
That's right.
So why? But they never do it.
They never did.
So those experts get up there and talk like gospel, and people who want to convict people take it. I mean, it really should be not relevant. If you've never talked to that child, you don't know anything about them, and you don't know why they're testifying the way they testified.
Yeah, so
it's a setup.
Very good point. So because of that, she admitted that her entire assessment was based on a 10-minute observation during trial.
Just like the jurors.
Yes, and because she did not want to open that door to talk about the conflict of interest that she was posing standing there as a clinician offering forensic data on a child.
So which one was she doing? She was doing the, I'm confused now.
She was not a clinician. She had never met with the child.
So she was only a forensic
person. Which meant that her job was to support the state, and her job there that day was not to offer a healing assessment of a child.
Healing, okay.
Her job that day was to explain why the state's position is correct.
Okay. Wow. And so how do you think you best attacked her?
By making sure that she stayed on, she didn't go clinical. She did not offer an opinion as to whether or not the child's personality was caused by a rape, for example, because she had never evaluated the child clinically. Okay. By keeping the clinical wall separate from the forensic side, she was not able to slip in that opinion evidence as an expert on the possibility that the child's actions were caused by a sexual assault, because she had never clinically assessed the child to say they were caused by sexual assault. So she could only offer an opinion as to what she saw in front of the jury during the 10 minutes that she watched Ashley on the stand.
Okay. Now let me ask Rony a question. Now, Rony, when you got arrested and you had to think back to the day that the child is saying that, you know, you sexually assaulted her, could you remember what you were doing that day?
Cuando la niña te acusó a ti de haberla violado esa noche, ¿tú te acuerdas qué es lo que tú estabas haciendo la supuesta noche de la violación?
Durmiendo para ir a trabajar al día siguiente.
He was sleeping because he had to go to work very early next morning.
Okay. And did y'all's children, I mean, since your daughter was involved, is your daughter like a light sleeper where she would say, I know whether or not my friend got up in the middle of the night or what?
No, she's a hard sleeper. She just put her head to the bed and wake up until the alarm wake her up to go to school.
And when you told your daughter that her friend had accused her dad of sexual assault, how did your daughter react to that? Or did you tell her?
First thing she do, she pray, because she know her dad will never do anything, and she's 14 years old, and she said, even if I have to stand in front of the judge, I will say it and scream. I will do anything so they can hear that my dad is innocent.
Oh, that's sweet. But y'all didn't have her testify?
Yes.
Oh, she did testify?
She
wow. Okay, and so what did she say?
She said, she tried to say, because
The judge, yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get to that. Go on.
What?
she tried to say that her dad was innocent. She just wanted to make sure everybody understand that it's not easy for a 14-year-old daughter to be in all the situation when Papa doesn't do anything. So it was a hard process for her.
And did she say that she doesn't think her friend ever left the room? Or she couldn't say?
No, she cannot say in the court why.
But Rony did.
So Rony testified? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what did he testify to?
During cross, the state tried to get illicit facts that he had access to the room. He said, no, I have a teenage daughter. The reason the apartment is set up like that is so that she could have her privacy and I have mine. Her door is locked. If I want to go in her room, I'll knock on the door. And despite numerous attempts to say, well, maybe, no, she's a teenager now. She's growing up. She's becoming a young lady. I have to respect her privacy. I'm strict. I want her in the house. But in the house, she needs her own space. So although Allison was really emotional and she was really just trying to get the jury pleading to say, look, my dad couldn't have done this. This is not him. Rony himself did a really good job of explaining how it wasn't possible for him to have access to that room without jimmying the door or something or using a keyhole thing.
And was Allison, did she also say that she keeps her bedroom door locked?
Sure did.
That's unusual for a teenager to have their bedroom locked. So that was even though the teenager's bedroom was locked, so to go to the restroom is inside that?
Exactly.
So you don't even have to go outside of your bedroom door?
No.
Oh, wow.
Was,
so the girl, you knew that
style.
girl was lying.
Yes.
And I'm sure when you talked to the jurors afterwards, they had picked up on that. Did
Yes.
y'all describe how the bathroom was inside the locked door?
We showed them layouts.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting.
The jury, the jury only deliberated 15 minutes on this case.
Wow. And that's a short time on a sexual assault.
Yes.
Because I'm sure it took you how many days to try it?
5.
Wow. To deliberate 15 minutes on 5. 15 minutes is how long it takes for them to all pick the foreman, to decide who of the 12 is going to actually be the foreman. That's probably all that they had to do. Once they took a vote, it was probably all,
That's what they
all
said.
for not guilty. And so they could just come on out of there. What a fantastic
And
job.
That's probably because of the motion in limine that the jury didn't get to hear, because there was this air over the entire court that there was something, and I did everything I could to say it other than without being held in contempt. The thing that the jury was not allowed to hear was the fact that this family had accused 2 other men of sexual assault of the 15-year-old sister of Ashley. Both charges were picked up by the police. Both charges were later dropped by the district attorney's office. That was limited out because in my zeal to avoid a trial, I informed the state of that when the investigator that we hired, John Manning, gave it to me, and that was a mistake.
See, and my approach is never to tell the state.
That was a mistake. I won't
never
do it again.
Yeah, and see, I've been practicing longer than you, so I've been burned like that already. So when you're trying to negotiate with the prosecutors and show things to them to raise doubt, then they just go back and ask the court, when you get to trial, don't let him talk about that. But there's case law that says that you can talk about things that would bias or influence the child's decision. There's cases, and I've done papers on it, and I've actually given lectures on it. And if you'd have called me, I would have given you all the cases, but I'm sure you looked them up.
No, actually, Eric, there was a TDCL, Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association cross-examination CLE in Dallas, and there's a lot of 613 stuff under bias.
Yeah, and I've done it. I mean,
Yes.
I've done it. I've put them in the pamphlets, and
Yeah.
we've all used each other's work. So yeah, so that 613 is important. And there's cases that are specifically on there. They're basically false impression cases. They're false impression. You can't leave a false impression. And if there's anything that could, we have a right to present a defense. And if there's anything that you can say to try to show that if the government has one theory, the child is behaving this way because of this, you can say, no, the child is behaving this way because of this.
That's right.
And that's where I would have tried to get it in is under the fact that she had been exposed to the fact that her sister, who's a few years older than her, had accused 2 different men of raping her. And both of those men were arrested, and they found that the children lied. So she had already been exposed to someone getting their way by accusing somebody of rape.
The majority of my 613 predicate questions were shot down as not being relevant.
But you did do a bill of review.
Several.
Several.
We did, during the course of that trial, we had to do
And
3.
jurors, they get hip to that too. When a bill of review is when we object as lawyers, we're objecting and asking the judge not to let something in or to let something in. And a lot of times, if we want the court of, in case our client loses, we have to ask for a bill of review, and that had the judge and we have an absolute right to that as a defense. So the judge has to tell the jury to leave the room because they don't want you to hear this information. But then we try it to the Court of Appeals. Well, we still talk about it. We still have the witnesses testify to it, or we talk it into the record so the court reporter takes it down. So just in case our client loses, there was evidence that we feel the judge should have let in that would have had a bearing on the jury, because the jury decides the facts, and they need to know everything that's in a child's mind to assess whether they're credible, they're being honest or not. And if she has been influenced before by an older sister who's done that with 2 different men before, and this same sister who's 15 is living with a 28-year-old man, which is against the law basically, because that's statutory rape unless the child has gotten permission to marry him by her mother.
And fails to report is a misdemeanor.
Wow. And so this is an issue that he didn't get to bring that up. So every time he tried to bring it up and the state objected and the judge kept it out, the jurors are sitting there saying, whoa, where is it? Something else we need to know about. And so they were paying attention to that.
Yes.
And so, right?
Exactly. When we walked in the back, the first thing they asked me, before even asking about Rony, was what was it we didn't know? And I told them that Maritza had accused 2 other men.
And Maritza's the child's mother.
Right. Maritza had accused 2 other men of sexually assaulting her older daughter. And the entire jury at that moment
felt good about their verdict.
Yes. They actually asked me if it would be okay if we all held hands and prayed together for their family. And I was really moved. They were stunned that they almost, well, they didn't almost because they ruled pretty quick.
But they could have. That
they didn't know something so huge. And the emotion in the room, the energy was so sincere because they really leaned into me pretty hard. And Jennifer saying, well, how is it that we didn't know that?
What did Jennifer say?
Well,
prosecutor.
She didn't really, I don't,
prosecutors can't explain that,
right?
Because that's a strategy.
She was just doing her job. She was,
Well, that's not necessarily your job because the case law says you can let that in.
Right.
And they need to let that in. And a smart prosecutor would let it in themselves and try to take do damage control.
Yeah, because the jury wants to hear the story.
They want to know the whole story. And sexual assault cases are tough cases. So,
if they want to know the whole story, why didn't let this side of the story speak?
I know, I agree with you. Tell me what you think the child, and this didn't come up in the trial, but it's the last 15 minutes of the show. We're going to talk about the child's motivation for lying on Rony. Why would you lie on your friend's a child? And so, but what she said didn't come up, her theory.
No.
So let's talk about your theory, and I'm going to let you tell yours. So tell me why you personally, not what your lawyer thinks, but why you think Ashley lied on your husband.
We can call this a love story because she's 11 years old, and I will say, and I'm excuse everybody, because it's hard. And she was in love with my 13-year-old daughter when this happened, so she cannot get my daughter. So she want hurt my daughter, hurting her father, which mother approved in base of what we hear in the past. So this is what they want, they cannot get. So this is what they do to a family that doesn't do anything to nobody.
So basically, Ashley was in love with your daughter.
Yes, ma'am.
In a sexual way, inappropriate sexual way.
And so
the 11-year-old girl, Ashley, who accused your husband of raping her, you spend the night with your daughters. Were they able to sleep in the same bed or different beds?
And they sleep in the same bed.
Same bed.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
she fell in love with your daughter, who was 13?
13 years old.
13 and 11. And at some point, the child would come over to your house on a Friday, Ashley, and not leave until what, Sunday. And so there was a point in which your husband told her mother, stop dropping this child off, because you would think it was going to be one night and she wouldn't come pick her up for 3 days, and the little girl would have to wear the same clothes the whole weekend.
Yeah, so this begin like a friend's visitation. She come and stay a night with my daughter. Then this is every weekend for at least 2 or 3 months. So we were babysitting somebody else's daughter.
Right.
So when Papa said, my house, my rules, no more, is when the story began.
Okay. So Papa said, Mr. Rony said, no more. Ma'am, you cannot keep dropping your kid off on a Friday, because these kids didn't go to school together. They just live in the same apartment complex. So no more spending the night. Their ages are different for 2 days. I mean, 2-3 days. That's not right. You don't call her. You don't bring her clothes. And we're babysitting. Where was the mother? Going out?
Exactly.
She was partying?
Partying, clubs, having fun.
Wow.
With her 15-year-old daughter.
She was partying with her 15-year-old daughter? Well, how old is the mother? 30?
34.
32. Wow. Wow. She was letting her 15-year-old daughter go to clubs?
With her.
With her.
But
Enjoying together.
The 15-year-old.
Enjoying together.
Yeah.
Wow.
The 15-year-old daughter's boyfriend is almost the same age as the mother, so
Wow.
that's not surprising.
So does a 15-year-old still go to school?
I don't know.
No.
Okay. So tell me what your theory is.
Okay, I think it's and like we said earlier, the jury really wants to hear the rest of the story. First of all, I think the motivation for this was the fact that Nancy was Maritza's landlord. Okay. Nancy.
Now let's make sure the jury understand. Maritza is the child's mother. Ashley's mother.
I apologize.
Okay, and Allison is Nancy and Ronnie's daughter. So they both have a name. So Allison is their 13-year-old daughter, and Ashley is the neighbor. And Maritza is her mother, and Maritza is the one that had been dropping this kid off every weekend. Okay, so go ahead. Now, they got the names right.
Yeah, I made that same mistake during trial so much that I literally wrote Allison in one hand and Ashley in the other doing closing. But, okay, Allison's mom is Nancy.
Okay.
Nancy and Allison Nancy is the manager of the apartment complex where Ashley and Maritza lived. Nancy evicted Ashley and Maritza.
Wow. Why did she evict them?
They didn't pay.
They didn't
No
pay?
payment.
No payment.
Right.
Wow.
Less than a month later, this allegation came forward. But it didn't come forward right away because after Nancy evicted Maritza and Ashley, Nancy and Rony kept allowing Ashley to spend the night for about another month.
Wow.
She would come over on Friday, you know, to stay a few hours.
And that took a lot of gall for her mother. That's bold for
Right.
the mother to be evicted, but still to bring that child over there as the babysitter.
Right. And so for about another month during the holidays, they're still letting the child come over. And then one day, Papa, Rony, said, no more. And the outcry happened about 5 days later. And the first lie was told at the outcry because in the outcry, she told the Children's Assessment Center that she hadn't been to their house since Christmas, when in fact she had just stopped coming over there a few days earlier when Rony said no more.
And talk about the note on the door.
Okay, and that's another thing. After the mother, Maritza, heard what happened with this case, the first thing she did after hearing what happened, she talked to the daughter, they called the police, and before taking the child to the hospital to be evaluated, she stops by at 10:30 at night. She stopped by Nancy's house to put a note on Nancy's door saying, Ronnie's in trouble, we need to talk, you need to call me right now. And I had her on the stand and I asked her about this note, and I approached her with this note. And
Did you still have the note?
Yes.
Well, you kept the note.
Mm-hmm.
That's smart.
Yes. And that was pretty interesting because that supports. I like that we really didn't want to go into the theory of a lesbian relationship between a 12 and 13-year-old, but the fact that she had been evicted and was so angry and upset with the Perez family that after hearing that your 12-year-old daughter has been raped by a grown man, after the police and all of this, before you, on your way to the hospital to get her evaluated, before getting her evaluated, you stopped by your old landlord's house to let her know, well, you know what, you're in trouble now. That sounds real petty, and and the jury felt the same way.
So how did she respond when you cross-examined Maritza, the mother, about leaving this note? What explanation did she have?
She thought it was important for the jury didn't buy it. She thought she was helping Nancy by doing her a service to let her know what kind of man she was married to. And across the same man that you left your daughter with.
Right.
Right.
For months and months and months and months, up until you were told not to leave the child anymore. It was okay until you were told not to.
That's right.
So now all of a sudden he's a bad man. And you were leaving your child with this man knowing that the mother was at work.
And I wanted to ask her, I tried to ask her about her 15-year-old daughter and a 28-year-old man, but of course that was shot down.
Right, and it's probably not relevant.
Yeah.
That part probably isn't relevant. Not about the daughter, but just about the fact that children in her family have falsely accused people of rape, and Ashley was aware of it.
Yes,
because that's the part that you have to know. Ashley,
that's what was limited out.
Right, because Ashley was aware of the fact that her older sister had gotten 2 other men in trouble.
That's right.
So, because jurors want to know, how can a child talk about sex? Well, first of all, she has a 15-year-old sister who is sexually active and living with a grown man, and she's accused 2 other men of sexually assaulting her. Now, let's go to that other theory. Do you believe that Ashley was really sexually assaulted by someone in the past?
I told the jury that during closing, when I was in the office, that was one of the things I had to, because the jury needed to know the rest of the story. So the way we did that was and that was where Dana Bradbury was really helpful. She reminded me of a point that I had to get in. She second chaired the trial with me. And one of the points we had to get in during closing was to complete the story that we started in voir dire. And basically I said, you know what? The truth of this case is that Ashley probably was assaulted at some point in her past. Does anyone on this jury, does anyone in this room believe that the Perez family is the only family that Ashley was dropped off at for 4 or 5 days at a time? I don't. And who knows what happened at some of those other houses that she was dropped off.
Or even with her sister.
Right.
With her big sister. Her big sister could have been going off screwing some little guy and left her sister in the other room with the other guy.
That's right.
Because her sister had been active for years.
And as if on cue, Ashley started crying, jumped up, and ran out of the courtroom, just as I said that. Couldn't have scripted it any better.
Wow. So somebody had raped that little girl.
I think so. Or molested her or something.
Or molested her, right, right. And that's what's so sad is they will accuse the wrong person of doing it because they still don't have the courage to face the real person that did it.
That's right.
But when they get angry with someone, they use that knowledge and that pain and they direct it in the wrong way to the wrong person. And that's what we as citizens really have to watch out for children, because maybe it happened. And that's the part that I think the prosecutors and the government could do a better job, is really trying to pinpoint who else could have done this.
That's right.
And who else has sexually assaulted you? Who else has touched you? They do ask that question, but when things don't add up, I mean, they should have, because the government knew that the older sister had had 2 other police reports and had had 2 other guys arrested and eventually acquitted or dismissed the cases. They should have been asking that little girl, were you talking to your sister back then? Were you familiar with sexual assaults at that time? You know, they should have asked her to see if she had that knowledge base and not just assumed that she didn't have it.
Exactly.
So at least to go into their decision-making process. Because, and this man should have had a bond. In a situation like this, as the story develops, I think people should reconsider. Well, we have 4 minutes, and so we're going to try to just wrap this up. Can you tell the viewers, Rony, how you feel being free? Did you get your job back?
I got my job back.
Yes.
That's good. That's a blessing. You got your job back. Because you were gone for 15 months, so that means you were a very good worker to get your job back.
Yeah, I working for I like it. I do an AC. I work it back. So all days, and I wake up, I tell my God, thank you for giving me a job too, give me my life back.
Right.
And the driving for my job, and see this tree, and I see a different, you know,
It's
because
different. It's beautiful now.
yeah.
We just have a few minutes to wrap it up. What do you want to say, Nancy, about how the system maybe kind of failed you, but then it worked in the end? So how do you feel?
Yeah, I just want to say that God is good all the time, and I want to thank Him first because I have my husband back, and also I want to thank Him because after this bad dream end, we know we have a friend in our family, and thank you for giving us everything back. The good thing about it is we're doing better now.
Wow.
We have kids, God in our life, and one more friend, a very good friend. That is
George
part
Tennant,
of
your
our
lawyer.
family.
And it's good for your lawyer
Yeah.
to be a friend. You hear that out there? Us lawyers aren't all bad. Now they're a friend of the family. And George, we have 3 minutes, so you
Yes.
can kind of take that last 3 minutes and say whatever you want.
Okay. Well, this trial was really educational for me as well. It gave me an opportunity. It really rejuvenated me because I had a client that was so willing to stand up for his innocence that he turned down the chance to go home before Christmas. And when you speak of friends, in talking with your client, especially in talking with Ms. Perez, we really connected before the trial was over. I knew that this was somebody that I was going to really be talking to for years to come. And he and Nancy are actually helping me lose weight now.
Oh my God!
Because he was gaining weight eating the carbs in prison or in jail, and he said that he and I together were gonna start our exercise routine together to get back in shape. So far I've lost about 7 pounds
Whoa.
working. They're working with me. So there's some good at the end of most of these stories, and I think this is a wonderful public service that you do, Vivian. You're an excellent trial lawyer. I'm honored to be on the show with you, and I look forward to the next time. I definitely will call.
Well, good. I just want to make sure that the viewers understand the moral to the story. Make sure you go to your jury service. Make sure you have an open mind and you're fair and impartial. Understand that there are two sides to the story. The government, the prosecutors have a difficult job, but when you get into a situation where there's a motivation to lie, trials are all about assessing the credibility of the witness. Said a different way, assessing the believability of the witness. And when you see a lawyer there fighting, trying to get some evidence in, it's because we think that's an important factor for you to consider in assessing the person's believability or credibility. We do know that there are monsters out there that rape children, and we're not trying to diminish that fact. I believe on the evening news, we hear it all day, every day. I think that the public is already very sensitive to children being molested. I think there are enough laws on the books. He could have gotten life in prison if he was convicted. You'll see people walking around saying that penalties should be stronger. Well, on your first offense for raping a child, you can get up to life in prison. So you can get from 5 to 99 years or life in prison. So that's a scary task, and there are people in prison who didn't rape or kill people. That's why with the new DNA science, people are getting out that have been in jail for years and years and years. And so I know that there are people out there that care about the system because he had a jury of his peers, and in Harris County, they weren't so cynical because they watched the news. They listened. They gave 5 days of their lives to listen to this story and to return Rony Perez back to his family. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something tonight by watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. It was my pleasure to present this case to you, and I'm glad it had a happy ending.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate